The following book is being read with permission from Random House Children's Books. Hello, all you rockstar readers! Today we're going to be taking a look at The Lorax, which is one of my absolute favorite books by Dr. Seuss. It takes place in Needville. I chose The Lorax because I really wanted to jump into springtime and pay attention to what us as human beings are putting into our own environment, just like what the Lorax does with the Onceler. So let's get started. The Lorax. At the far end of town where the grickle grass grows, and the wind smells slow and sour when it blows, and no birds ever sing except old crows, is the street of the lifted Lorax. And deep in the grickle grass, some people say, if you look deep enough, you can still see today where the Lorax once stood, just as long as it could, before somebody lifted the Lorax away. What was the Lorax, and why was it there, and why was it lifted right into the air? From far end of town where the grickle grass grows, the old Onceler still lives there. Ask him, he knows. So I mentioned the Onceler before we started the book. I want you guys to think about who the Onceler might be, and as we read, you might figure out who he actually is. You won't see the Onceler. Don't knock at his door. He stays in his lurkum on top of his store. He lurks in his lurkum, cold under the roof, where he makes his own clothes out of muffled moof. And on special dank midnights in August he peeks out of the shutters, and sometimes he speaks and tells how the Lorax was lifted away. He'll tell you perhaps, if you're willing to pay. On the end of a rope, he lets down a pin tail, and you have to toss in 15 cents and a nail in the shell of a great-great-great-grandfather snail. Then he pulls up the pail, makes a most careful count to see if you've paid him the proper amount. Then he hides what you paid him away in his snub, and creates a strange hole in his grubblest grub. And then he grunts, I will call you by the whisper-ma-phone, for the secrets I tell are for your ears alone. Why do you think the story says that the Onceler wants to make sure this, his story is for the boy alone? Do you think that it's something bad? Do you think it's something scary? Let's find out. Slup! Down slups the whisper-ma-phone to your ear, and the old Onceler's whispers not very clear, since they have no to come down since the snurgly hose, and he sounds as if he's had a smallish bees up his nose. Now I'll tell you, he says with his teeth sounding gray, how the Lorax got lifted and taken away. It all started way back, such a long, long time back. Way back in the days when the grass was still green, and the pond is still wet, and the clouds were still clean, and the song of the Swami Swans rang out into space, one morning I came across this glorious place. I first saw the trees, the truffula trees, the bright-colored tufts in the truffula trees, mile after mile in the fresh morning breeze. What do you notice about this picture that was different from the other pictures? Could they be brighter? Could they be that there's more animals and trees than there was in the last pictures? Let's find out. And under the trees I saw brown barbaloots frisking about in their barbaloot suits. They played in the shade, ate truffula fruits. From the rippleless pond came the comfortable sound of the humming fish humming while splashing around. But those trees, those truffula trees, All my life I'd been searching for trees such as these. The touch of their tufts was much softer than silk, and they had the sweet smell of fresh butterfly milk. I felt a great leaping, a joy in my heart. I knew just what I'd do. I unloaded my cart. In no time at all, I had built a small shop, and then I chopped down a truffle tree with just one chop. And with great skillful skill and the great speedy speed, I took the soft tuft and I knitted a thneed. I mentioned at the beginning of the story that this is called Thneedville. I think it gets its name from the Thneeds. In the instant I'd finished, I heard a gazump. I looked and I saw something pop out of the stump of the tree I'd chopped down. It was sort of a man. Describe him? That's hard. I don't know if I can. He was shortish and oldish and brownish and mossy. And he spoke with a voice that was sharpish and bossy. Why do you think this character popped out of the stump? Who do you think the character is? We must read to find out. Mister, he said with a sawdusty sneeze, I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees. And I speak for the trees have no tongues, and I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs. And he was very upset, and he shouted and puffed, what's that thing you made out of my truffle truft? So he's the Lorax, as we found out, because he said, I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees. What do you think his emotion is? Do you think he's happy? Do you think he's sad? Do you think he's angry? Do you think he's bored? Let's find out to see if you can figure it out. Look, Lorax, I said, there's no cause for alarm. I just chopped one tree. I'm doing no harm. I'm being quite useful. This thing is a thneed. A thneed is a fine something that all people need. It's a shirt. It's a sock. It's a glove. It's a hat. But it has other uses. Yes, far beyond that. You can use it for carpets, for pillows, for sheets, or curtains, or covers, or bicycle sheets. The Lorax said, Sir, you are crazy with greed. There is no one on earth who would buy that thneed. But the very next minute I proved he was wrong, for that at that minute a chop came along, and he thought at that thneed that I had knitted was great, and he happily bought it for $3.98. I laughed at the Lorax. You poor stupid guy. You can never tell what some people will buy. I repeat, said the Lorax, I speak for the trees. I'm busy, I told him. Shut up, if you please. I rushed across the room and in no time at all built a radio phone. I put in a quick call. I called all my brothers and his uncles and aunts, and I said, listen here, it's a wonderful chance for the whole Onceler family to get mighty rich. Get over here fast. Take the road to North Nitch. Turn left at Weehawken, sharp right at South Snitch. Make sure we're paying attention to the illustrations and making sure that we are understanding that the colors in the pictures might reflect on how the tone of the story is told. And in no time at all, the factory I built, the whole Onceler family was working full tilt. We were knitting all thneeds just as busy as bees, and to the sound of chopping of truffle trees. Then, oh, baby, oh, how my business did grow. Now chopping one tree at a time was too slow. I quickly invented my super axe hacker, which whacked off 4 truffle trees in just one smacker. We were making thneeds 4 times as fast as before, and that Lorax, he didn't show up anymore. So what do you think will happen if the Lorax didn't show up again? Do you think that he just disappeared out of the story? I didn't either. But the next week he knocked on my new office door. He snapped, "I'm the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you don't seem to be chopping as fast as you please. But I'm also in charge of the brown barbaloots, who played in the shade in their barbaloot suits, and happily lived eating truffle of fruits. Now, thanks to your hacking my trees to the ground, there's not enough truffle of fruit to go around, and my poor barbaloots are getting all the crummies because they have gas, no food in their tummies." Do you see the barbaloots? They're all sad because they're not getting enough food. "They loved living here, but I can't let them stay. They'll have to find food, and I hope that they may. Good luck, boys," he cried, and he sent them away. I, the Onceler, felt sad as I watched them all go, but business is business, and business must grow, regardless of crummies and tummies, you know. I meant no harm, I most truly did not, but I had to grow bigger, so bigger I got. I biggered my factory, I biggered my roads, I biggered my wagons, and I biggered my loads. Of the thieves I shipped out was shipping them forth to the south, to the east, to the west, to the north. I went right on biggering, selling more needs, and I biggered my money, which everyone needs. Do you think money is what everybody needs? I think everybody needs food, shelter, happiness, like what the Onceler's not giving to the barbaloots. Then again he came back, and I was fixing some pipes when that old nuisance Lorax pig came back with more gripes. "I am the Lorax," he coughed and he whiffed. He sneezed and he snuffled, he snargled and he sniffed. "Onceler," he cried with a cruffulous croak, "Onceler, you're making such smogulous smoke. My poor swabby swans, why, they can't sing a note. No one can sing who has smog in their throat." You see the smog and the swanny swans who are behind the Onceler and the Lorax. So what is happening to all the creatures that lived here? They're getting told to go away because the Onceler wants to make his own business. "And so," said the Lorax, "please pardon my cough. They cannot live here, so I'm sending them off. Where will they go? I hopefully know. They may have to fly for a month or a year to escape the smog you smogged up all around here." "What's more," snapped the Lorax, his dander was up, "let me say a few words about Gluppity-Glup. Your machinery chugs on day and night without stop, making Gluppity-Glup, also sloppity-slop. And what you do with this leftover goo, I'll show you, you dirty Onceler man, you." "You're glumping the pond where the hummingfish hummed. No more can they hum, for their gills are all glummed. So I'm sending them off. Oh, their future is dreary. They'll walk on their fins and get hopefully weary in some search of water that isn't so smeary." So do you guys notice that the picture has changed from earlier in the book? Because I think that this looks a lot sadder than this. And then I got mad. I got terribly mad. I yelled at the Lorax, "Now listen here, Dad. All you do is yap yap and say bad, 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 bad. Well, I have my rights, sir, and I'm telling you I intend to go on doing what I do. And for your information, you Lorax, I'm figuring on biggering and biggering and biggering and biggering, turning more truffle trees into thneeds, which everyone needs." And at that very moment, we heard a loud whack. From outside the fields came a snickening smack of the axe on a tree, and we heard the tree fall, the very last truffle tree of them all. No more trees, no more needs, no more work to be done. So in time, my uncles, aunts, everyone, all waved me goodbye, and they jumped in the cars, and they drove away under the smoke-smuggled stars. Now all that was left 'neath the bad-smelling sky was my empty factory, the Lorax, and I. So what happened here? Everybody left because there was no more truffle trees to make thneeds, right? Wonder what's going to happen next. The Lorax said nothing, he just gave me a glance. He gave me a very sad backwards glance, and he lifted himself by the seat of his pants, and I'll never forget the grim look on his face when he hesitated himself and took leave of this place, though a hole in the smog without leaving a trace. And all that the Lorax left here in this mess was a small pile of rocks with one word: unless. Whatever that means, well, I just couldn't guess. That was a long, long ago, but each day since that day I've sat here and worried away. Through the years, while my buildings have fallen apart, I've worried about it with all of my heart. Do you think the Lorax had a plan when he said unless? When he wrote unless in the rocks? I think he might have. But now, says the Onceler, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's gonna get better. It's not. So catch, calls the Onceler, he lets something fall. It's a truffula seed, it's the last one of all. You're in charge of the last of the truffula seeds, and the truffula trees, and what everyone needs. Plant a new truffula, treat it with care, give it clean water, and give it fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from axes that hack, and then the Lorax and all of his friends may just come back. So, would you guys care a whole awful lot if something like that happened in today's society? And how would you feel being in charge of the last truffula seed? And what would you change if you were the Lorax or if you were the Onceler? Would you guys change something that you guys did in the story? So think back to the illustrations that I told you to look at. So this is how the book started. Kind of sad and gloomy. And then we get happy and colorful. And then as we go on, it starts to get more and more gloomy, right? Until we're all the way back to where we started, right? So do you think the Lorax was mad, sad, angry, and that's why he left? I think he was more upset than anything that nobody was listening to him, even though he was speaking for the truffula trees. And this relates to real life because the world, our Earth, is kind of like Thneedville in the sense that factories and litter and all of those bad things for the environment happen on an everyday basis. So we need to do our best when we see some litter on the ground or something that isn't where it should belong, that it could harm the environment or it could harm some animals, that we do what we can to make sure that it's picked up and it's all good for the rest of the time. What can we do to make the environment better? I want you guys to turn and talk to your neighbor and figure out a way that we can make our environment in Indiana much better than it already is. Okay. And I appreciate you guys sitting and listening to me and listening to one of my favorite stories. The Lorax is such a good book. I would definitely go back and read it and look at the illustrations more closely and more in detail, and maybe you guys can pick out some different things that you guys could do for our environment that the Lorax was trying to do for Thneedville. Thanks for watching, guys. Thank you again, Dr. Seuss and Random House Children's Books, for allowing me to do this interactive read aloud.